Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me game designer and publisher Carl Rossi. Carl, thank you so much for getting on with me. He wrote a world guide called Terra that's set in a steampunk world in the Pathfinder setting or the Pathfinder rule set. Carl, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and about Terra.
I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a very long time. I have a lot of fun when new people come in to games that I'm running because I can always tell them, almost always tell them that I've been gaming longer than they've been alive. I started when I was 7, so that's 48 years ago that I've been gaming. No, 46, sorry, bad math. And it's been off and on, but fairly continuous. I've played all kinds of different systems. And Terra started with my oldest son was playing a game by Sierra. It was an older game when he played it even, and it's a very old game. It was called Arcanium, and it was based in a steampunk world. That influenced my son quite a bit, and he decided to create his own campaign world called the City of Dusk. That led to me deciding, well, hey, this is something that people seem to like. Maybe we can put together our own role-playing game world that's steampunk. At the time, there really wasn't anything. Unfortunately, I'm kind of slow, so there's plenty out there now. But Terra has a few unique concepts about it that I'm pretty proud of.
So what was the spark to create it? You said your son, but you have to kind of create a whole world. What were some of the unique things that kind of sparked to have you create this?
William Gibson, and I can't remember his co-author's name, but William Gibson did a book called The Difference Engine. A lot of authors will claim to have invented steampunk, but really the earliest one I found is that book by William Gibson, who is also the one who wrote the Neuromancer, which is considered the start of steampunk. Not steampunk, cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk, yeah.
And that really, for some reason, that book really resonated with me. It's very different in that one of the main characters in the book is a box of punch cards.
Oh, really?
It's as soon as I got to the end of the book and I was like, this makes no sense. And another friend told me, just look at it as if this was a character. Oh, now I get it. Now I understand. So he used a really unique concept in there. I thought that was kind of neat too. I also started reading the Girl Genius comic by Kill and Kaja Folio. And that had a big impact on the game in a way I didn't expect. We, of course, wanted a mad scientist class to go with the game. And we planned on calling it, with huge creativity on my part, a mad scientist. But I figured, hey, I'll just email the authors and see if we can call it a spark. And nothing happened. We were actually getting close to being finished. And I get this email from Phil Folio saying, hey, this is a cool idea. And so we ended up getting the rights to use Spark in our campaign world, which we're very thrilled with. I guess technically I should be saying, hey, visit girlgeniusonline.com, because everything we do, part of the deal is I throw in a little ad for them. So all our novels and in the books and in the character reference guide that we've done, there's an ad for them. It's a fun comic, and we're just very honored to be able to use that as part of our game system. We also added the charlatan, which was something that I started with first edition D&D, and they had the illusionist class, and I love the illusionist class. And then second edition killed it. and third edition didn't help, either the 3.5 or 4 or, and so just kind of a tribute to that first edition illusionist, the con man, the charlatan, is basically an illusionist. He's a master of illusion. So we added, those are the two main classes that we added. And we've worked from there and developed a world that I like to think of as unique in its own way, because it mixes a little bit of magic and science. Yeah, you get some of the things you really like, but one of the rules we put on ourselves early on was steampunk is more than just gears and goggles. There's a song by Sir Reginald out on YouTube. Glue some gears on it and call it steampunk. And that did a bit to influence me too, to keep me more online with, okay, steampunk is a Victorian era society that's been thrust into the computer age. And we go on that definition. So one of our novels has one of the Sparks wearing a pair of goggles. Mm-hmm. And that actually, when the idea came up, I was like, no, please, no goggles. It's so overdone. But Golden Druid did such a good job on the artwork that, yeah, I'm very happy with the goggles.
So let's talk about this. You not only have you created this world, but you have novels and artwork to go along with that. How those came about? And I know that Taya Chandra wrote the novels,
right?
And then you said, what was it, Golden Wolf?
Golden Druid.
Golden Druid. Excuse me. Name. That's her professional. Okay, Golden Druid did the artwork. How did you go ahead and find these people that would share your vision and create these novels for you? And did you have what sort of influence did you have on the plot of the novel?
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
As far as the art goes, we have a little bit of a company curse on art, and that is I can't commission maps. I've commissioned over 20 artists to do maps for me, and I've got nothing to show for it. Oh, wow. I won't name any of the artists because a lot of them, it was just life came up and they weren't able to complete it. But it's become a company curse and a little bit of a joke. So a lot of times with the novels, people go, but what about a map? Well, we're going to go with Terry Pratchett's You Can't Map an Imagination. So when the truth is, I'm just cursed with that. The cover of the first book actually wasn't done by Golden Druid. It's a large tank. And that was done by Ben Wooten. He does a lot of artwork for Wizards of the Coast and Paizo. And I met him at a convention, one of the Paizo cons. And we got to talking. He goes, hey, I don't have any steampunk in my portfolio. And I looked at him and I said, I don't have enough money in my bank account. And he gave me his card and said, hey, contact me when this is over and we'll work something out. And he did. So I like to tell people when they see that first book, hey, this is the guy who designed the Balrog for the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies.
Nice.
And fortunately and unfortunately, what happened with that was it set a really high bar on the cover for the novels. And when I went to find somebody else to do it, I just couldn't find somebody I could afford. And finally, I contacted Golden Druid. She'd done some art that I thought would be appropriate to the books. And I told her, I said, look, I'm not at all dissing how much you charge. You definitely charge what you're worth. However, I can't quite afford that. Can you recommend an artist that is in this price range that'll meet this standard? And it was funny because she came back and she goes, wow, you got a really good deal on that cover. Nobody's going to be able to match that, but I'll give you a quote. And so she did. We worked it out, and she's pretty much been her cover artist since then. So she plays a pretty vital role on how things develop. And in some cases, Chai has even rewritten the story slightly to match the cover. I do have a rule that says if it's on the cover, it has to be in the book. Fawcent is kind of an exception to that. Funny story on Fawcent. I I sent Golden Druid a complete list of all the scenes that I thought would make a good cover. And she came back and she goes, I'm just not feeling it with any of these. And one thing I've learned is trust the artist. Don't force the artwork. So I limit it to it needs to be in the book. She goes, is there any scenes you've forgotten? Was there any scenes you left out? Maybe we can do something with them. And I told her, I said, well, there's one scene that happens off camera. And it definitely happens, but the reader's not there for it. And that's the scene that ended up on the cover. So that's like the exception to my rule. Is it's sort of in the book, but not quite. But she's done a great job, and a lot of her sales, I'm sure, come from those awesome covers. We actually just commissioned her again to do the artwork for the cover of a short story anthology that's coming out. And I'm pretty excited about that because I got looking at the scenes I sent her. I was like, wow, these are pretty dull. It's a lot of it's background stories, and they're interesting, but they're not your typical role-playing game world fantasy. So there's not a lot of excitement to them. And she came back, and we'll have a really nice cover for that, I'm sure. She does excellent work. As far as the authors, one thing I noticed through Paizo in particular was that a lot of their stuff, they had two separate markets that they were built on. And one of them was their novels. So a lot of people that didn't play role-playing games would read their novels. A lot of people that played the role-playing games would read the novels. And of course, some people that play the role-playing games would ignore the novels altogether.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe this is something, especially since we've got the term spark on our side. Maybe we could do something. And I was playing World of Warcraft, and I mentioned in Guild Chat, we were just talking about real life stuff, and it came up, and I said, hey, I'm looking for I am looking for an author. We want to start coming out with some novels. And this little timid voice goes, I write. And everybody's like, who the heck just said that? Because we'd never heard the voice in chat before. And that was Chaya. So I said, hey, here's my email, and send me some of your works. You can go to sajanitales.com, SAJANITAILS.com. It's tails like a wolf tail.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, if you look up there, you can find the story she submitted. It's out there with a few changes and a little bit of polish. And I read through it, and I was like, hey, yeah, I could work with this. I can do this. And that's how we got our author. We do have another author coming out soon. I'm kind of excited about it. The Wolves of Stedwick will be our second mystery novel, provided Chaya finishes Benale's Gambit in time. So I'm excited about that. It'll definitely be our first Gothic horror novel. I'm excited about the steampunk Gothic horror. That just sounds great to me.
It does. Do these authors pitch you ideas, or do you come to them with like, this is what I kind of want?
With Chaya for the first book, basically I gave her a summary. I said, okay, well, the World Guide talks about this pirate queen, Sajani, and she's a Vicati, which is one of the wolf race, and she becomes a pirate. I know this much. And she has a ship. I don't know what it looks like, but she's got one. And she has a crew. Yeah, she's got a crew. And I was like, this isn't a lot of information. I was like, no, you just kind of run with it. And what's funny is when that first novel came back, I read through the first draft, and it didn't have a plot.
Oh, really? That's kind of important.
And I'm thinking, I got a contract on this book. I can't just back out of it. And so I very carefully went to Chaya. I was like, I don't mean to be hypercritical or anything, but we are going to need a plot in this. And so if you read the book, it's kind of fun, and it's really fast, and it comes to a rather quick end, which actually fits the story really well. But if you know that what was happening was we had a book with no plot, then the sudden ending at the end is like, oh, okay, that also makes sense.
Well, the secret's out now. They didn't have a plot in the first, so anybody that reads it, they know they can have an idea of what's going on.
It's right. And I try not to, I look at it more as a funny story than a criticism of the author. I know exactly what happened on it. And in some ways, it was my fault for being so, to put some restrictions on the story, and yet at the same time, be so open about it. I think that's what resulted in what happened. She got carried away with a minor subplot, and then when that was done, she's like, okay, it's done. And it's like, nope, that was your. So most of the time with the books, I leave it open. Fawcett was fairly open. The prequel trilogy that's coming out right now is Sejani's backstory from when she was a teenager. And that one is basically I told her there's these two events that happen. She's going to a girls' school in another country, and she runs away. She ends up on a ship, and I don't want to do a spoiler, but a certain event on the ship takes place. So those two, that was all I gave her. It was supposed to be one book, and she got carried away with that one too, and it's now a trilogy. So I try to stay out of the author's hair as much as possible on it. So mostly what I do is I check for continuity with what we have in the World Guide, and make sure that the content is family friendly. We do try to keep it PG-13. So there is some stuff in there that one of the things Chaya does really well. There's a scene in What Once Was Eden where somebody gets their throat ripped out. And when I first was told in the summary that this was going to happen, I was like, oh, that's not gonna, no, trust me on this. I got this. And it came through. And if you're a 10-year-old reading it, you don't even know what happened. If you're an adult reading it, you go, wow, that person just got their throat ripped out.
So it's subtle.
Yeah, it's subtle. It scales a lot of what violence is in there scales to what you know. There's even a rape scene in Fawcett, but I've read it to my 10-year-olds without a problem. And a 10-year-old's going to go, this person's getting robbed. An adult's going to go, wow, that's bad. So it scales with what you know, rather than just going into all the details on it. And that works for us. I think that's an important quality. I wish more books would do that, to be honest. A lot of times it's like, I was in the military for 10 plus years. I'm not a prude, but wow, I could have gone the rest of my life and not known what you just told me.
Right.
So we try to avoid things like that. I other than that, though, like I was saying, I give the authors as much leeway as I can. Fawcett was completely Chaya. I didn't do anything on that. And the same goes for The Wolves of Stedwick that's coming out. I try not to touch it if I can help it.
So the World Guide, that was written, from what I can see, about a decade ago, and you did a Kickstarter for it. What were some of the challenges when you were writing that and creating that?
That's still actually a little bit of a sad controversy. Let me start by apologizing to my backers. When I came out with I have problems with PTSD from serving in Iraq. And one of the Kickstarter has you list possible setbacks that could come up. And one of those was the PTSD. And partway through that project, it just flared up. And I was not able to do a whole lot, but I had planned for that. And so my son and my daughter my oldest son and my daughter were also working on it. My daughter was doing the basically the world history, and my oldest son was doing the game design. And so when I fell back on them, they took over and produced the game. The reason I apologize to the backers is I feel bad. I have a lot of industry experience in publishing. I started in high school working for the school newspaper and got involved with more than just writing the articles. I worked with some of the press work and layout. And this was back when cut and paste was with an X-Acto knife and rubber cement, and learned things from that perspective. I've worked on several different types of offset presses, so I know the concept that goes into that. I understand the pre-press, and probably I tend to be a little bit of a publishing snob in some ways. I'll look at some other people's stuff and I'll go, wow, where did you learn layout? Google Docs? But yeah, so I have a huge background with that. And so my son and my daughter did the absolute best they could. And I'm not dissing what they say at all, but I'll always be a little saddened by the fact that it could have gone a little further. It could have done a little better. Along those lines, one thing we are doing with Terra is I came across a little bit of a limitation on using the Pathfinder rules. We were working on getting it converted over for 5th edition, and there were just some major issues on being able to do that. And that got me thinking and realizing that a lot of the same issues were with the Pathfinder. And basically what it comes down to is this: Pathfinder and 5th edition are both designed for a very fantasy heavy world. And it kind of overshadows, well, not even kind of, it definitely overshadows the steampunk science element that we wanted. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at a few other systems, and what we decided to do is to create our own system from the ground up. And it's still D20 based, so people that are familiar with Pathfinder and 5e will have a bit of an advantage on learning it. We took out some things, added some others. I'm particularly proud of our subclass system that we have. The way that works is instead of multi-classing at 3rd level, you pick a second class. You can pick the same class as what you have, but you pick this other class, and then there's subclass abilities that go along with that. And so, for instance, like for Paladin, let's say, there's kind of a more traditional healing type Paladin. There's also a bit of a gunslinger range weapon type Paladin. And then the subclass that we're still working on now is the Holy Biker. It's a motorcycle gang inspired Paladin. So if you take all 3 of those, you're going to end up with the most thorough kick butt type of Paladin. But if you don't, if you say mix that with Spark or something else, you're not going to be any less powerful for it. So it worked out really well for allowing people a lot more variety in their class builds without adding a lot of choice paralysis for feats, because we basically have removed feats. That's another story. I'm pretty proud of that one too. If a person goes in there feeling like they need them, well, then their DM can throw it in, but you shouldn't end up feeling like you need it. There's a lot of choice, but we've limited the choice on the certain classes. And like I mentioned with the Paladin, there's the 2 different types. So each class usually has 2 different archetypes. You can just pick straight down one archetype or straight down the other, or you can mix and match as you want. But the idea there was, again, let's eliminate some of that choice paralysis on it. So the new system I'm pretty proud of, and I hope to have it out pretty soon. Just need a bit more play testing on it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how do you maintain that balance, because some classes could be heavily stronger than others, and you don't want that in a role-playing game. You want every class to be have different abilities, but be kind of equal, so you can have a cohesive team. Like, what kind of play tests have you been able to do with that?
One of the things that we concentrate on in the class development is roles. So one class might do more damage in combat. For instance, the charlatan, the con artist, kind of weak actually in combat. Not useless. You're still going to find a use for them. But what they're doing in combat, rather than doing the damage, is they're enhancing the damage of the other classes. So their enhancement is going to be added to the damage that they would do when we look at, okay, how effective are they in combat? And that kind of balances out. We also balance out a little bit with the healing. If a class has healing, we'll take a little bit back on the damage. We do have a set progression for damage as far as spells and other abilities go. So that kind of keeps us in line, but at the same time, we're not held 100% to it. We'll adjust it based on, like, for instance, if something just does massive amounts of damage and doesn't do anything else, then it's going to hit the max that will allow for that level. If it has other effects, we'll take a little bit off on that to kind of balance it out. Class balance is really important to me. I'm not going to name any particular editions because I feel we're strong enough. I don't have to criticize other systems, but I will say that there are some systems out there that could have definitely benefited from more play testing and more concentration on class balance. Especially when you do store groups like I do. I DM at the local game store, and wow, you want to play test with those people. Those are the people you want to play test with, because if the rules are possible to break or bend, those are the people that do it. So it's been really helpful doing the play test over there. And I do think that other systems could have benefited from it. Not saying those systems are bad, just that I think they could have benefited from doing more of that and less of the homebrew, where people do try to balance it out a little more usually.
Right. And you are, you're doing your own game design system in this world of Terra. So you're in charge of everything. So, you have to find a publisher to publish your books. You have to do the marketing. You have to do everything. How have you been able to find a publisher that meets the needs that you need?
Well, actually, we are the publisher.
Okay.
I do the publishing. So I locate the printer, do the printer, adjust the costs, and do the approval. There is a minor change that just happened. Up until just a couple of weeks ago, actually, I was the publisher. My wife stepped in, and she'll be now acting as publisher. She'll be the one more deciding what gets published. And I'll be the operations manager, which is pretty much what I was mostly doing anyway. Deciding, this is where it's going to be printed. This is the format that we're going to use. Just a lot of the technical side of the publishing. For those that are looking to publish their own stuff, the game world's kind of harsh, and pretty much from what I've seen, you're going to have to try to find your own way on that. If there's people that listen to your podcast and they want to contact me about that, I'm happy to give advice and direction on it. But as far as finding somebody to publish it, I'm the worst person probably to ask that, because I've never bothered.
Well, the thing is, most people are indie publishers. They're going to be like you, where they create their own publishing company, but they still have to find a printer, a printing press, or somebody that can do it with a reasonable cost. Because if I was doing it, I got limited funds, so I have to be able to do that in my price range without going bankrupt. You know what I mean?
Lightning Source is a good printer. They come out fairly on the low end. They're the ones that are used by Amazon, and both Amazon and Barnes and Noble, although they both call them something different. But it is Lightning Source. It's also used by DM's Guild. So they're the big one for that.
Mhm.
And they do a good job of making sure that you've got things in a format that can be approved for printing. My advantage is it's usually approved on the first try for me because I speak the lingo, but they'll work with you on getting that done. One thing we are transitioning to right now is we're going to POD, and as part of that process, well, we're already POD through Lightning Source, but we're looking at doing it ourselves. I know how to bind if I have the machinery to do it. I know how to do the cut, how the cuts work and all that stuff. So we now have our own cutter. We have a printer that can handle up to 13 by 19 sheets, and that'll allow us to do a lot more as far as that goes, and about half our cost.
Yeah, that's a big deal right there. Is if you're able to do it yourself, you're able to save on the cost of production.
We will be, once we get up and going and know that we can do it, I do want to help other small publishers with that. But for right now, we're still fighting some of the equipment. I couldn't get the big expensive stuff I learned on. So there's a little bit of a learning curve on the cheaper stuff. It's just as effective, but it doesn't do as much work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, the scoring machine we've got right now, for some reason it does the scoring is putting the little indentation on the paper if you're going to do a fold, and I go to put that through, and it goes like, say, 10 inches of the 11 inches through there, and then skews to the right or the left. It's random on which way it goes. I'm still working on that. Once we get the equipment down, though, yeah, I've already talked a bit to a comic maker about picking up her stuff once we have it down. So hopefully that'll mitigate some of our costs as well, if we can also use the equipment to help other people out. Let's see, I will be able to beat Lightning Source slightly to start with, but not for long. I'll say that as we get bigger and have higher demand, I'll need more people, and once that happens, it'll be hard. But
Right.
to start with, I do want to try to help other people on it.
That's awesome. Being able to help other people and being able to want to as well. Another thing is you have to market your projects. How have you been able to keep up with that and do that?
That's a huge learning curve for me. I have a degree in business management and marketing, and let me tell you, I earned that. I graduated in 1992, and I might as well have gotten a liberal arts degree in basket weaving. As far as the business management side goes, nothing of that has changed. How it works is a little bit different, but the numbers are still the same. An income statement is still an income statement. A balance sheet is still a balance sheet. But as far as marketing goes, it's not even remotely the same. When I was studying it, billboards were considered really highly effective in some markets, and now they're not so much. The big thing is social media, and that's the learning curve for me. I've learned a lot of important, valuable lessons on that. One of the big ones that is just now dawning on me, because I'm slow with stuff like that, is interact with your audience. The Terra Project on Facebook at one point had over 2,500 followers. It's slowly gone down, but those followers are pretty much dead. I wasn't doing anything with them. I was just coming out with constant content. And after a while of, not really seeing anything on that, I'd advertise on Facebook, and that was pointless. And yeah, so eventually we stopped our social media stuff while I reevaluated. And that's actually where we're at right now, is reevaluating where we want to go forward with the social media.
Well, I think that's a key for anybody. If things aren't working, to step back and reevaluate to see where you can pivot into, and not just keep full rushing forward without any success. So I think that's a good tip or trick that you just gave there.
It applies to game design too. I had this great idea for initiative and I still love it. It's great, but I can't get it to work. And well, I got it to work actually. And we play tested. I was like, this really sucks. And so being able to step back and go, that doesn't do what I'd hoped it did. And rather than bullying ahead and going, no, I can get this to work. I can get this to work. Just be able to go, hey, it didn't really work. Let's back off from this and go a different direction. So if I could have gotten it to work, it would have completely changed how the math worked in game mechanics for combat. Basically, it was a segment-based initiative system. So you rolled for your initiative and then different actions took different amounts of time.
Mm.
So if you were using a dagger, you get more turns than if you were using a two-handed sword.
Right.
But as you can imagine, that's really hard to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time we did it, the tests came back were really positive. And my son went to the DM afterwards and he goes, now hold on a second. He says, there's just one thing I need to know. How were you tracking this? And guy called up the spreadsheet and was showing us how he was tracking on the spreadsheet. And my son texted me. It goes, that's not going to work. We can't count on people being able to do that much. And yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And so we had a program written for it. Actually, you can see it. I think it's, well, let's see.
While you're looking that up, you gave another key tip or trick, I think, for anybody that's creative that wants to be an author, an artist, game designer, anything, like separating your work from yourself and being able to look at it subjectively and not have your emotions to it.
Yeah, that is a big deal. And the subclass thing is another one that I was really excited about. And we got to the play testing. I was like, good, I can still be excited about this because this is working the way I thought it would work.
Right.
Archetypes is working the way I thought it would work. One of the drawbacks for me is because I have games so long, it's really easy for me to try to say, well, yeah, that'll work. And I have to temper myself on that and go, no, it might not work. You need to make sure that it's tested. And the initiative system is my big example for other game designers. Be willing to go, hey, that didn't work. Right. Be willing to say, hey, that class just totally kicked butt and it shouldn't have. Not that bad. You shouldn't take out a legendary creature in one hit. Obviously I did something, either I need to adjust the legendary creature or I need to adjust the combat damage, but something somewhere there needs to be adjusted a little bit. Not that the luck shouldn't allow something like that to happen, but if it's built into the class to happen, good example of that, 5e game. The poor DM has only been playing for 2 or 3 years. The combined number of years playing for the players is well over 150. And that's intimidating.
Right.
So he's constantly trying to throw stuff at us that is a challenge to us. And he threw out this big legendary, it was for a side quest. But he's like, you guys are killing everything so quick. And less than a round on that one.
Oh,
but
wow.
that was all in the rolls and that's the sort of, you want that to be able to happen. It's important that things like that be able to happen because that's the stories that gamers tell to each other. We'll go, oh yeah, they threw this ancient hag at us and the grave cleric did this and the paladin did this and pow, then the bard shot one arrow and it was dead. Which is about what happens.
No, and that does happen in games. I was playing a game with some family members, and it was set up to where you're going in this room, and you had the big bad guy there, and he was on this bridge, and underneath him was a circle of liquefied gold, basically, that was pouring out of this dragon's mouth, and it was going around, and he was going to sacrifice somebody. And my it was a rogue, and it was a critical success in his thing. So he snuck up and just basically just pile drive that that bad guy into the molten golden lava, basically, and just killed him. That's not shouldn't happen, but like that's stuff like that happens, and that's what they remember. That was like, remember when we did that? And
Oh yeah, that's where the stories come from.
Yeah,
that
that's
and the other thing is kind of I found a little annoying. And again, I'm not going to name any particular systems, but they're making death harder and harder and harder.
right.
I feel like they don't necessarily want to do that, because a lot of the cool stories are, yeah, the dragon still had 20 hit points left, and I was down to 1, and 3/4 of the party is down, and all I had was a single blowgun dart. And Patui, got a critical hit on it. The poison kicked in, it failed its save, its magic, and pow, it was dead. That's the kind of stories that, if there isn't that risk to the character, then you're missing out on a lot. I know some DMs are, oh, I'd never kill an alpha player. I don't try. I see myself as being really on the rooting for the party. I want the party to win. I'm telling you, heroic story here. Heroic stories don't end with a total party kill.
Right.
But at the same time, if I'm always pulling that punch, the players are just going, yeah, he won't kill us. And there's no risk, and there's no reward on it, as far as, you get that real story worthy event happening. I remember one campaign was first edition, back when saving throws became useless after about level 10, because those saving throws were so low at the higher levels that anybody could make a save. And we came across a demon lord after another fight without resting, and we were low on healing spells, and we were looking for a place to rest, and came across a demon lord, and we're thinking, okay, we're dead. This DM doesn't pull punches. He'll just kill us off. And the druid decides, well, you know what? I've got Finger of Death as a druid. I'm going to just use that. It's a save or die spell. And he'd used it on almost every fight we'd had in that campaign. Actually, the whole time we've been playing together. It's my brother-in-law. He's one of the few people that's actually gamed longer than I have by about 2 years. He started with chainmail.
Oh, wow.
But he'd been trying it in tons of fights, and like I said, the saving system on that was very broken. And demon lords also have magic resistance to top off the saving throw. And so he's like, I'm going to do it because I always do it. And he cast it, and the demon lord missed his save and missed his magic resistance, and pow, fight was over. It would have been cool either way, but knowing that we were going to die, and then having that work was just, you want to build, one of the things with game design is you definitely want to build that stuff in there. You don't want to leave it out. You want to have that burst damage. You don't want to have it all evened out. But at the same time, you want to be doing the math and going, okay, how am I going to make it so that it's still challenging to the players, but they're not just going to keel over?
Well, any good story has tension, and that's kind of what you need to be built in as a game designer, is that tension, that risk reward type tension that so it makes people want to come back and play for more.
Yeah, I think some people take it to extremes. There is built into the new Terra system, there is a system that makes it so that you cannot always resurrect somebody. There were two reasons I went with that. One was, I'll admit, purely religious. I didn't want to cheapen resurrection. I wanted it to be something still kind of neat. At the same time, you have to have that in because it compensates for those times when the dice just absolutely didn't work, and you're acknowledging the players' investment in their character, emotional investment in their character. So you kind of want to balance that. But we did add a rule that the world has a reincarnation built into it.
Oh,
And
nice.
so the rule is that the optional rule is that as time goes on, the person is more likely, their soul's more likely to go on to its next incarnation. And so you won't be able to res it after that point. But we kept that as an optional rule for those groups that just want to be able to. Can't remember his name all of a sudden. He was one of the Ments. I can't remember his first name. He was one of the early designers for D&D, and he basically talks about the when they were designing the original game, it was like, oh yeah, these guys are just going to die all the time. That's the point. Look at it from the perspective they were coming from a tabletop war game to a tabletop role-playing game. So in a tabletop war game, yeah, little figures are getting kicked off left and right on there. And so the original concept was, well, if your character dies, just erase the name, put a new name, and have the guy's cousin show up. And so that was the philosophy there. And things have moved on since then.
They have. Well, whenever you talk to somebody like you did earlier, like about campaigns and things that you've done, it's always like, we did this, I did this, and it becomes a part of you. It doesn't just, it's not something outside of you for whatever, like it lives inside of you in some way.
Yeah. Although that does bring up one of my pet peeves in gaming. The DM did not kill you. The DM killed your character, okay?
Right.
I get that it's you did this, and I totally get that. But when we get to that one little point, let's just for the sake of less media attention for crazy gamer things, speak the language that they're going to understand.
Right. No, I get that too. And in defense of DMs and GMs and whatever game master title you want to do, the characters that you run and that I run as a GM, their goal is to kill the party. They're not supposed,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and you don't have to make it easy, but you don't have to make it difficult either. Like, if you run a balanced campaign, there should be, but like I said earlier, that tension reward where there should be some risk involved.
Yeah, I like to tell my store groups a story to kind of clue them in on my DMing style about early on, Paladin in the group, the character died, and he was doing something really brave. They were in an inn. They cast a fire-based spell. I already warned them, it's made of old wood, and there's a lot of flammable stuff in here. Not worded quite like that, a little more subtly, but they knew, they'd been told several times, and they caught the inn on fire. Well, the paladin felt responsible for that, and so went in and rescued somebody, found somebody that needed rescuing, and came back out. He's like, okay, I'm going to do it again. Like, okay, well, we need to check on this. Is the roof still stable, or are these things happening? The fire spread, it's now covering this amount of the inn. Well, do I find anybody? I forget how many people he rescued, but after a while, the inn is completely engulfed in flame. He's going back in. You don't find anybody. Well, I go back in again. You don't find anybody. I go back in again. You don't find anybody. And the whole time I'm describing how things are collapsing and going away. And finally, I hold up one hand and I do this. Count down on my fingers. The roof collapsed. He's like, what happens? Well, I could do a lot of rolls, but you're 5th level. It's a big roof. You were on the 1st floor. We're just going to go with your dad. And so the party was like, he was pretty upset about it because, like I said, there's that emotional investment. I'm not knocking him for being upset about it, but at the same time, the party was like, you should have seen that coming.
Right.
And having told that story, one of the store groups went into a situation like that. And, well, not like that, but a situation where I described everything. The entire room was filled with molds and slimes. And they were experienced players. They know that mold and slime in gaming terms does not mean that it hasn't been cleaned in a while. So I'm describing the different types of slimes. I'm letting them know that there's monsters and puddings and all kinds of stuff in here. And they look up and they look at the ceiling and it's completely coated with stuff. And I'm thinking, what idiot stands in a room coated with this? You move back out, you do something with fire, there's all kinds of stuff you could do, but you don't stand in the middle of the room. But no, they go into the middle of the room. They walk out into the middle of the room. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to just kill them, but these things are supposed to attack. It's written into the module. These things will attack if they get to this point, and they're at that point. What do? I don't want a TPK. So I have this voice ring out, go, leave now. And they ignored it. So I did it again. And then I held up one hand, and they'd heard this story before. And so I start counting down. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give them a chance. And I'm like, the ceiling, the slimes and everything on the ceiling come down on you. Well, do you get a saving throw? You're about 60 feet away from the door. And then in that case too, the party came back later and they're like, they were upset about it at first, but then one of them goes, you know what? Looking back on it, we deserve that.
Well, and it also helps them realize that their actions have consequences. And so like when they're, like you said, that, they came back and said they deserved it, but it helps them become better role players and better gamers down the road, because they can recognize signals and signs and be able to read those better.
Yeah, one of my favorite gaming stories where I was DMing a bunch of experienced players, and you get a little jaded. You're like, well, yeah, I like this character, but you know what? It is just a piece of paper. And so you're willing to take a little more chances as an experienced player a lot of times. Or the character's been going for so long, you're like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to risk losing this guy. I really like this guy. I've been playing this guy for years. But this was a new campaign. We were playing first level, and the party rounds a band, and my brother-in-law, who's gamed for, both of us are up near 50 years gaming. My brother-in-law, his monk rounds the corner and gets one-shotted. First level, they go down easy.
Right.
And so the party's like, okay, this is bad, but we're getting ready to fight. He's unconscious, he isn't dead, but we had a brand new player. It was first campaign, and it's his first character, and the character's only first level, and that guy just took off. He's like, I'm out of here.
No, people get emotionally invested in it, which is great. It makes it more personable, but at the same time, it is just a character that you create, and you can have ups and downs and kill them and do whatever.
Well, we did okay in the fight. It was a lucky. They did okay in the fight. It was a lucky hit, but I just liked it because it was like, okay, an experienced gamer would have went its first level. I think it was like 3 kobolds. It wasn't anything really major. It's just that monks don't have a lot of armor at first level. They don't have a lot of hit points. And so it went down, and the other guy who had more hit points did more damage. He was a rogue. Better armor. Nope, he was gone.
Well, Carl, do you have any tips or tricks for anybody that wants to become a game designer and do this as a career?
Well, the big thing I have to say on it is please do the math. There's a lot of math involved with the game. And one of the things I've noticed, in particular, the one that comes up the most is understand what a bell curve is. You don't need to know all the algebra behind it and exactly how it works, but do realize that if you just have a single die rolled, then it's an equal chance of an event occurring all the way across that. If you have more than one die roll, towards the center, there's going to be a higher chance of that happening. And the more dice you add, the higher that center peak is going to be. And if you can use that sometimes to your advantage. But for instance, one thing that people will do is they're like, okay, well, I want to make it so that they're going to do a lot of damage on this hit. So I'm going to give them 3d6. Okay. Well, there's a little bit of a problem with that. As anybody who's rolled characters can tell you, you're going to get those middle ones more often than you're going to get the outlying ones. And that's fine if that's what you want. But you do need to understand that that's what's going to happen. That's what the characters are going to see. And so somebody with a decent bonus and using a longsword, so D8, is going to consistently do about the same amount of damage as what you're doing with the 3d6. So you just need to understand that as a game designer, how the different types of math work. Understand that it's okay to have a first level spell that does 20 points of damage, but first level characters are going to be using that spell. And if you give your first level characters 5 hit points, they're going to be dying fairly often. So that, I think that's just the really big key. And it's the biggest mistake I see most of the time is they just don't do the math. They do what they think would be fun, which is of course part of what you want to do, but you also have to look at the math that's behind that. And that makes a huge difference in your design.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, Carl, thank you so much for getting on with me. Go ahead and tell people how they can get a hold of you, how to get, Terra, the World Building Guide, and then the novels. What's the best way to go about that?
The digital version of the novels is available on Amazon. Right now, the easiest way to find that is just look up Chaya Chandra, ChayaChandra, and you'll find her there. The print version of the books are available on Barnes & Noble, as are the World Guide and the Character Reference Guide, the Pathfinder books that we've done. And you can also find them at shop.realrpgames.com. Really proud of that website. Let me see. Or you can reach me if you have questions at Carl with a C at realrpgames.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I appreciate you getting on with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.